Hello, veterans. It's nice to be back. In fact, it's a privilege for me to connect with you once again here on this platform. And I thank you all for taking out your time and being here with us today as we celebrate, as India celebrates its 75th anniversary of independence. I've been told to speak about the effect of those days on the armed forces as we evolved from that place. And of course, the evolution continues even today. But yes, I'll restrict myself to those days, fateful days of 1947 when we gained freedom. Uh, this is also an occasion for all of us who live in free world, who are lucky enough to have that kind of liberty and freedom of speech, expression, religion, profession, whatever, uh, to enjoy and cherish a thing called freedom or independence. So we all are lucky that way, and I wish our countries, our world as a whole, continues to remain so. Right. So, as we all know, India is not a country which was born on 15th of August 1947. India is a very old civilization, possibly one of the oldest in the world with a recorded history. However, as we look at India today from a geopolitical angle, this India came into being after it gained freedom from British Empire on 15th of August 1947. And a day prior to that, another nation which was once part of Indian subcontinent, and of course subcontinent remains the same, a part of Indian territory, got separated and became Pakistan. That was on 14th of August 1947. uh, as history tells us, those were not good times. A lot of bitterness was created, a lot of blood was shed, and like everybody else in the subcontinent, the British forces, whether it was the British Army, British Air Force, British Navy, also had to undergo a kind of a transition or a split, because as the geography was split, so were the assets which belonged to erstwhile British forces. The silver lining in the whole process is that while politics and political dispensation had the reasons, whether justified, unjustified, to hasten up this process of exchange of population, because Muslims residing in mainland India, those who wanted to, had to shift to Pakistan, and Pakistan, which was declared as a country which was created because of a religion. So non-Muslims, again, those who wanted to, had to come to India. So that exchange was done in a hurry, and we saw 1 million lives being lost. Very sad. We will not really look that side today. Uh, Defense forces, fortunately, did this split or this division of their assets, resources, in a very meticulous, deliberate way. There were frictions, there were arguments, and there were agreements, and at the end of the day, it happened much more smoothly and without any heartburns. However, this process of exchange of troops, everybody had a independence and a choice to exercise whether he wanted to go to. That time we had, I don't think we had lady officers or women in forces, so I'll refer to them he. So whether he wanted to go to Pakistan or he wanted to come to India. It's not that every Muslim officer or soldier went to Pakistan and every non-Muslim came to India. There were people who stayed back. One example, shining example, is Brigadier Usman, a young bright officer who was upcoming, and that time had to incidentally was placed at a place which was to become part of Pakistan. So Mr. Jinnah actually offered him uh, that if he, like he told him, if you join army, Pakistan army, you'll be made chief of army staff. Now those were the days when, because of movement out of continent by Britishers, a certain vacuum was felt in the forces. Politics, of course, we know how it happened, who became prime minister and all, but armed forces were one potent tool both the countries had, which couldn't afford to have a vacuum at the top. So three chiefs of India, like army chief, navy chief, and air force chief, and same was the case in Pakistan, they continued to be British officers. And on top of both the forces, there was somebody called Commander in Chief, who again was a Britisher, and Supreme Commander, of course, was a Britisher. So this was a setup. Pakistan also opted for a few officers of mid and junior level seniority to continue serving for a few more years till they stabilized. But whereas India only opted for the top brass. So as a result, many young officers in very young age became brigadiers and generals in the Indian Army, because the vacuum which had been created was filled up by promoting young officers. So Brigadier Usman was a young officer. He, however, politely declined, which was not unusual, despite all that thing happening, religious-based partition happening. And he came back to India, and he continued to serve with India. He had his own reasons. He loved the land where he had been born in. His friends were here, his relatives were here, and friendship then didn't mean that only one religion, people belonging to one religion were his friends. No. So India is a secular nation, so it has been so for centuries. So he stayed, and it's a different matter that later on he got killed in action and he was awarded Mahavir Chakra. So what I'm trying to say by bringing out this fact is that while things were going haywire and a lot of chaos was being created on the streets across the so-called newly drawn international border, good sense prevailed in army. There was no case of people killing each other within the army. uh, whole units shifted. In many cases, companies, pure companies from one battalion went other way, battalions names were changed, and everything happened smoothly. I only hope and wish and pray that such a kind of ethos which we see in armed forces, irrespective of its geographical location, that also spreads out to our society, and then probably we'll have lesser problems in our life. Okay, few instances which relate to those days. One was of course Brigadier Usman's case. Second, another incident which comes to my mind is that it was just after independence. Partition had happened, and countries have been divided. Armies, like I told you, was again still in the process of moving across the borders. So one officer that time, a major, later on he became a general, Major Kalkat. He was a brigade major in one of the brigades which was located in the so-called Pakistani territory. And his move to India had been delayed because the person from Pakistan army who was supposed to relieve him, he had got delayed. So he stayed on. But by the time he left, because of certain reasons, certain things which he knew and which in the mind of Pakistani army shouldn't have been known. So he was put under house arrest or kind of detained, and he was not allowed to leave Pakistan even when his reliever came. So he, his wife, and a toddler, they were kept in a house arrest. Now, in the same station was a battalion in which he had served during World War II. A company which he was part of while fighting in World War II, those JCU NCOs came to know about his house arrest. The company commander of that company also knew Major Kalkat very well, and so company commander and few chosen senior JCOs NCOs, they got together, had a secret meeting, and they worked out a plan, and they actually plucked this family out of that house arrest through a ploy and took them out, because that was a place where even if they would have, anything would have happened to them and nobody would come to know. So they brought them to a place in limelight where everybody knew that yes, Major Kalkat and his wife and kid, so they are here, and so no big harm. The ultimate harm was kind of ruled out. From there, his wife and kid was shifted to India, and after some time, with the involvement of some senior officers of Pakistan Army, he was also sent back to India. What happened to those people? That is a different story. But what I'm trying to say is that this is how the kind of you can call it confusion, you can call it dilemma, or you can call it spirit of some other extreme, where everything else took a back seat, but the comradeship, the brotherhood which forces have, and especially after World War II, where they had fought together, that came to the fore, and a few good lives were saved. So this has been a very serious thing. Now I'll come to slightly lighter part. People would have heard name called General Karyappa, Field Marshal later on. In 1947, when conflict in Jammu and Kashmir started, we call it conflict and not a war, because it remained constructed or restricted to state of Jammu and Kashmir, while rest of the border was peaceful. So General Karyappa was an army commander. His headquarters was in Western Army Commander. His headquarters was in Delhi. He had gone to Jammu with his ADC and few more officers to have a look and feel of the actual operations which were happening. Once he reached Jammu, it was monsoon time and it started raining very heavily. Now J&K state had no road link with Punjab and the rest of the India. There was no bridge over River Ravi which divided J&K state, or which ran as a border between J&K state and Punjab. So they had put a bridge of boats over which people will just walk over and small vehicles will also travel. So that bridge got washed away in the floods. and continued to rain, and even those aircraft of that era, they didn't have wherewithal to land during that weather. So, and Jammu airfield was not metalled, so it becomes all you know unserviceable because of surface going bad and slush. Now, this army commander who had come to Jammu for a few days got stuck for more than a week. And one point he told his ADC, Lieutenant General Sinha, then let's do one thing: call up GOC of Lahore and ask him the permission for me to travel to New Delhi via Pakistan, because Jammu had a metal road connecting Sialkot which had gone to Pakistan. There was a road link also coming to Jammu via Sialkot. The road link had been stopped already after independence and partition. A road was there with a barrier. So it was a very funny situation. That time, Captain Sinha called up Pakistani Exchange in Lahore and asked the operator to connect him with the GOC. So while he was kept on hold, and as it happened in the army, the GOC would have picked up the phone and he would have come to know that somebody from the ADC to General Karyappa, and General Karyappa happened to be instructor of that GOC once upon a time. So they had that kind of a relationship. So very smartly, he handed over phone to his wife. So when the line was put through, it was GOC's wife on one side speaking to Captain Sinha and asking ki, yeah, and saying sorry that husband was not well and he was not in position to take the call. And she said, whatever the matter, you please let me know. So Captain Sinha requested the lady that General Karyappa is here and he wants to go back to uh, this place, Delhi, via Sialkot, Lahore. Permission should be granted and the move should be facilitated. So she says, no, no worries, but let my husband recover a bit and we'll come back to you. They never came back and that never happened. But look at the situation where there's a armies of two countries, air force, of course, they're facing off each other in Jammu and Kashmir, and army commander of Indian Army was planning to travel via Lahore uh, and Sialkot and Lahore. This was a very tricky situation for GOC Lahore, who had been student of General Karyappa and probably who didn't have kind of gall to say no on face. So he took a very smart route. It and why General Karyappa thought about it as a possibility was because while that conflict was going on, the military celebrations were going on as usual. Like there was a cavalry day celebration in Pakistan, and many Indian officers, cavalry officers, had actually gone over to attend that function there. So it was a very funny kind of, I think you can call it confused army, or army who couldn't care, whatever you may like to call it. But the situation was something like this, that we were there and we were not there. Then there was one brigadier called Brigadier Harbaksh Singh, who later on became Lieutenant General. Uh, General Harbaksh was a brigade commander and he was operating in Kupwara, Thithwal area. So, as every commander desires to know what lies on the other side of the hill, he also wanted to know. But those were days when no UAV, no satellite, nothing was available. So he had no idea who was the officer commanding adversaries on the other side. Now, since they knew each other, most officers knew each other very well, just till a few months back. So he was keen to know, and that actually helps. When you know personality of your opponent, you know how is he thinking, and so somehow they couldn't make out. But as they were going on, the operation was progressing and they were moving towards what we call line of control today. Suddenly, somebody brings a big army boot uh, in front of Brigadier Harbaksh and says, "Yeah, this is what we captured. We found somewhere, lying in one of the rest houses from where uh, some officers had just left in the face of Indian advance." Looking at the boot, he said, "Oh, he's so and so," because the boot was very big. Those days, nobody in India used to make boots of that kind, and that officer who wore those shoes, was a Pathan officer from the same battalion to which, once upon a time, not too far back in time, the brigadier had belonged. And looking at the boot, he said, "Oh, he's the same guy. He's so and so," because his shoes used to be imported from England. So he said, "Now I know my adversary." So see, this is very I don't know. It's not a funny thing a funny situation, so to call it, but something which is very unusual. Same Brigadier Harbaksh, when he went ahead in Tithwal sector, there was a place where Indian post and Pakistani posts were very close to each other. They were so close that just about 25-30 meters apart. And there were two hillocks, and these two posts were among the most active posts. They were firing like anything at each other. Basically, it had come down to trench warfare when no advance has stalled, and you're facing each other. So while they kept on making life difficult for each other, one day the white flag came up from Pakistani side, and the JCO walked over, and he told the Indian JCO, he said, "Why are we making life difficult for ourselves for no rhyme or reason? So yes, we need to fight. We will fight, but let's have a kind of a timetable." So within between two of them and their subordinates, who are say about 50, 25 on either side or 20 on either side, they evolved a timetable. So there used to be morning stand two, then some firing, then 1 hour breakfast break, uh, breakfast and other routine, and then again firing for 2-3 hours, then lunch break, and then afternoon rest. Everything they coordinated. So this Brigadier Harbaksh, when he came to know the kind of activity like heavy firing happening at that place, he actually went to visit our post. He was a ground soldier. So when he reached that post, he started crawling because he was told that, and it was a fact that on that post you couldn't expose yourself. You could even take your head out, or you will be shot. And suddenly he finds a JCO, Indian JCO, Indian Army, who's there to receive him. This guy is standing on open on a boulder, and in fact, Brigadier Harbaksh tells him, "Come down, come down. Why are you standing, exposing yourself?" And he says, "Don't worry, sir, come up." So what had happened before his arrival? This JCU had told his counterpart across the line, "See, our officer is coming, senior officer is coming, so no firing for next 1 hour." So this is how uh, they managed conflict during those days. Uh, when it came to Air Force, because of kind of territory which was being given to India and the pro rata division, Indian Air Force got big chunk of British Air Force assets, while Pakistan got a relatively smaller number of aircraft. Strangely, however, while India had many aircraft, it didn't have spare and repair facility because those bases were left in Pakistan. So Pakistan had small air force, big repair and spare reserve, and here it was India, larger air force and no spares. So as the conflict continued between two countries in Jammu and Kashmir, there came a stage very soon where Indian Army was running out of spares, Indian Air Force was running out of spares. So one Air Force officer here, not the top brass, they were all Britishers, they were doing their job, but at certain level down below things were happening. So he called up his counterpart in Pakistan, and this Indian officer later on rose to a very high rank in Indian Army, and he told him that I need spares which you have, and you have things in surplus. Uh, he didn't tell him, but in a way, what the implication was that you give me spares so that I can bombard you better. He said, "Okay, come over." So this pilot flies the aircraft, lands in Pakistan. He's met by his old friend there, and he says, "You have 2 hours. Just take what you want to take and just vanish from this place." And this is what he did. He filled up his aircraft with spares, whatever he wanted, and came back to India. So this those were the interesting times when these things were happening, and uh, from there we moved on. Indian and Pakistani armies been meeting each other, serving together in UN missions. They've been part of peacekeeping forces together. In fact, there are times in UN mission where they have fought alongside. So I think this is where we stand out. We as people in uniform, even veterans, we stand out. We understand the conflict better. We are the ones who pay the maximum cost for conflicts, and we know how to kind of tide through or navigate through such waters. Yes, we fight for our countries. We have our causes to defend and protect, but these instances also give us a kind of sense that how things can be better managed, even when everything else around you is in a bit of chaos. There are many stories I can continue forever, but time allotted to me is now over. And with this, and hoping that this kind of culture uh, gets into our civil societies, and civil society has its own very many pluses. These things also get added on to those pluses, and we continue to live in a world which is full of peace, harmony, and we're able to manage our conflicts better. Thanks a ton once again. Happy freedom, happy independence to everybody. Thank you.